The date was April 14th, 1865, a night that would forever change the course of American history. On this fateful night, the United States lost one of its most iconic leaders, President Abraham Lincoln. The man who held the nation together during its most tumultuous times, the man who led the country through the bloody Civil War, and the man who penned the Emancipation Proclamation, was struck down in his prime. The setting was Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The president, along with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, and a couple of guests, were enjoying an evening of laughter and relaxation, a brief respite from the burdens of leadership. Unbeknownst to them, a sinister plot was unfolding behind the scenes. John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, had managed to infiltrate the theater with a single, devastating purpose: to assassinate the president. Booth, an accomplished actor, knew the theater's layout like the back of his hand. He slipped into the presidential box and with a single gunshot ended the life of Abraham Lincoln. The news spread like wildfire, plunging the nation into mourning. This act of violence marked the first time a sitting U.S. president had been assassinated, setting a chilling precedent. The significance of Lincoln's assassination cannot be overstated. He was a beacon of hope for a country torn apart by civil war. His vision of a unified nation, free of slavery, was a guiding light that many believed would lead the nation towards a brighter future. His death left a void that was felt not just in the White House, but across the entire country. But what if that tragic night had taken a different turn? What if Abraham Lincoln hadn't been assassinated? As we delve into this alternate reality, we'll explore the potential repercussions on American history, Lincoln's plans for Reconstruction, and how the path towards civil rights could have been vastly different under his stewardship. Stay with us on this captivating journey into the realm of what-ifs. Picture this: Lincoln survives that night in Ford's Theater. What happens next? Let's venture into this alternate timeline where our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, doesn't meet his untimely end on that fateful April night in 1865. Instead, he walks out of the theater, unscathed and ready to face the monumental task of reconstructing a nation torn apart by civil war. Lincoln had a vision of a united country, healed from the wounds of a brutal conflict with freedom and justice as its guiding principles. His plans for Reconstruction were rooted in his belief in the essential unity of the American people. He wanted to mend the North-South divide, not with a heavy hand, but with empathy and understanding. Now imagine this vision coming to fruition. Southern states, instead of being subjected to punitive measures, are welcomed back into the Union with open arms. A lenient policy towards the South, coupled with a commitment to civil rights, could have accelerated the healing process. Lincoln's vision for post-war America also included a robust plan for economic recovery. He aimed to harness the nation's industrial might, developed during the war, to rebuild the shattered Southern economy. This could have spurred a period of unprecedented growth and prosperity, strengthening the Union and reducing regional disparities. The political landscape, too, could have been vastly different. Lincoln's charisma and political acumen, coupled with his vision for a united America, could have shaped a more inclusive and progressive political discourse. The radical Republicans' push for harsher measures against the South might have been tempered, leading to a more balanced and less divisive approach to Reconstruction. But would Lincoln's survival have guaranteed his safety in the years to come? After all, he was a polarizing figure, loved by many but also deeply despised by others. Could he have navigated the turbulent waters of post-war America without falling victim to another assassination attempt? Even if Lincoln had survived that fateful night, would he have been safe from further attempts on his life? Following the end of the Civil War, the nation was a tinderbox of tension and turmoil. Lincoln, as the figurehead of the Union victory, was a natural target for those still bitter about the outcome. The South, in particular, had a host of discontented individuals who would have seen Lincoln's continued presidency as an affront to their way of life. John Wilkes Booth, the man who succeeded in assassinating Lincoln, was far from the only person with a grudge against the president. It is likely that there were others who, given the opportunity, might have made similar attempts on Lincoln's life. Furthermore, Lincoln's radical views on the abolition of slavery and his plans for Reconstruction made him a target for the more conservative factions of his own party. His progressive stance and his refusal to compromise on issues of morality and justice put him at odds with those who favored a more gradual approach to change. However, it's important to remember that Lincoln was not just a target, but a shrewd and savvy politician. He had faced threats before and had always managed to navigate the treacherous waters of politics with skill and courage. Had he survived the assassination attempt, there's no doubt that he would have continued to do so, facing down any threats with the same determination and resolve. But would that have been enough to shield him from harm? The answer is, we simply don't know. What we do know is that the presidency of Abraham Lincoln, had it continued, would have been fraught with danger and intrigue, a testament to the turbulent times in which he lived. It's clear that Lincoln would have faced a challenging and potentially dangerous presidency. Despite the threats, Lincoln was a man with a vision to rebuild a nation torn apart by civil war. His plans for Reconstruction were as bold and ambitious as the man himself. He sought not just to mend, but to transform. Lincoln's vision of Reconstruction was rooted in the belief that the Southern states had never legally separated from the Union. He saw the Confederate government as an unlawful assembly of rebels, and their secession as nothing more than a rebellion. Therefore, in his mind, the Southern states needed not to be conquered, but to be restored. He conceived a plan known as the 10% Plan. Under this plan, a Southern state could be readmitted into the Union once 10% of its voters swore an oath of allegiance to the Union and agreed to abide by emancipation. It was a plan of leniency and forgiveness, meant to expedite the healing and restoration of the Union. But Lincoln's Reconstruction plan was not just about political restoration, it was about social restoration as well. He advocated for the establishment of new state governments in the South that would be run by Southerners loyal to the Union. He also supported the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency created to help former slaves transition to freedom and self-sufficiency. Moreover, Lincoln wasn't just planning for the immediate aftermath of the war, he was looking ahead, far into the future. He had dreams of a transcontinental railroad, of homestead acts granting land to settlers, of education and opportunity for all, regardless of race. But these plans were not without their critics. Many in the North felt that Lincoln was being too lenient, too forgiving toward the South. They wanted a harsher, punitive approach. They wanted the South to pay for the rebellion. But would Lincoln's plans have been enough to heal a divided nation? Would his vision of a united, egalitarian America have become a reality? Or would his leniency have allowed the old prejudices and hatreds to fester and grow once more? These are questions we can only ponder, for history took a different turn. In a time of great division, compromise is often necessary. But would Lincoln have been willing to compromise his principles? Abraham Lincoln was a masterful politician, known for his ability to navigate the turbulent waters of a deeply divided nation. His political style was often marked by a willingness to listen, to understand, and yes, to compromise when needed. It's important to remember that Lincoln's presidency was not just about ending slavery, but about preserving the Union. In fact, he once famously stated, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union and is not either to save or to destroy slavery." This statement reflects a leader who, while unwavering in his moral convictions, understood that strategic compromise could be a tool to achieve greater goals. So, had he lived, would Lincoln have been willing to compromise during the Reconstruction process? The answer, while speculative, seems to be a resounding yes. He had already shown a willingness to alter his strategies based on the changing circumstances and needs of the nation. For instance, consider his 10% plan for Reconstruction, a proposal aimed at reuniting the North and South swiftly and leniently. His approach was not universally popular, with some in his own party arguing for a harsher stance on the South. Yet Lincoln stood firm in his belief that compromise and leniency would pave the way for a quicker and more effective healing process. Lincoln's willingness to compromise, however, never meant a compromise of his principles. Even in his pragmatism, Lincoln held fast to his belief in liberty and equality, principles that he believed were at the heart of the American experiment. While we can only speculate, it's clear that Lincoln's presidency would have been a time of great change. His willingness to compromise, paired with his steadfast commitment to his principles, would likely have shaped a very different path for America's Reconstruction era. With Lincoln at the helm, how would the journey towards civil rights for all U.S. citizens have been different? Imagine a world where Lincoln's vision for the United States, one of unity and equality, was allowed to flourish. Lincoln's presidency was marked by his unyielding commitment to the abolition of slavery. He believed in a United States where all people, irrespective of their race, were granted the same rights and freedoms. His Emancipation Proclamation was a testament to this belief, marking a turning point in the history of civil rights in the United States. Yet the path to freedom was far from smooth. Despite the abolition of slavery, the fight for civil rights was a hard-fought battle that spanned over a century. But what if Lincoln had been there to steer the ship? His moderate approach to Reconstruction, coupled with his deep-rooted belief in equality, could have potentially accelerated the journey towards civil rights. Under Lincoln's direction, we might have seen an early enforcement of the 14th Amendment, granting equal protection under the law to all citizens, regardless of race or color. Perhaps his leadership would have resulted in stricter enforcement of the 15th Amendment, ensuring that the right to vote would not be denied based on race or color. Moreover, Lincoln's vision for America was one of unity. His policies could have quelled the resentment brewing in the South post-Civil War, promoting healing and reconciliation rather than division. This unity could have formed a strong foundation for the civil rights movement, fostering an environment where transformative change was not just possible, but inevitable. However, history is not a clear-cut path. It's a winding road filled with the unforeseen and the unexpected. While Lincoln's policies may have set the stage for a more equitable society, the resistance to change was, and remains, a formidable opponent. We can only imagine the world that might have been had Lincoln survived that fateful night in 1865. His vision for a united, equal America lives on as a reminder of the path not taken, but also as an inspiration for the journey still ahead. In the end, we are left with a world of what-ifs. What if that fateful night at Ford's Theater had ended differently? Abraham Lincoln, the man who guided America through its greatest constitutional, military, and moral crisis, might have been able to fulfill his vision of Reconstruction. His willingness to compromise and his steely resolve may have resulted in a different path towards civil rights. It's easy to imagine a world where Lincoln's life wasn't cut short, where his leadership continued to guide the nation through its healing process. But history unfolded as it did, and Lincoln's assassination became a pivotal moment in our nation's story. It's an intriguing exercise to consider the what-ifs, but it's also a stark reminder of the significant impact one individual can have on the course of history. While we can never know for certain what would have happened if Lincoln hadn't been assassinated, it's clear that his legacy continues to shape our world today.